Masechet Kiddushin Daf Mem Chet. We're at the bottom of 47b. We saw the statement of Rav that one cannot perform Kiddushin with a loan. I can't go to a woman and give her a loan and then afterwards say, that money that I gave you, you're Mekudeshet with that money. Because the money is already given to you to be spent. And that's it, right? Even if it's in your house, doesn't matter. You know, right? You went and you spent it or you can spend it. It's yours. I can't give it to you. And Kiddushin has to be something that I'm giving you now. And therefore, you cannot do Kiddushin with a loan. Now we're going to challenge Rav a few times. And first we start Nema Ketanae. It seems that Rav is taking sides in a Tanaitic controversy, which would be a problem, because why is Rav picking just one side of this machloket? But we will answer it. So hitkadshi li bishtar hov o sheya lo milveh biyad acherim v'risha alehem. Rabbi Meir omer mikudeshet, Chachamim omrim ena mikudeshet. If someone says a man says to a woman, be mikudeshet to me with this IOU. We'll discuss who owes who. That is it? Someone else owes me money, or this woman owes me money? Who needs to pay this IOU? Anyway, if I say, I'm transferring this IOU to you, and be Mekudeshet to me with it, or that someone else owed me money, a third party owed me money, and I go to the woman and I say, be Mekudeshet to me through you collecting the loan. I give you permission to collect this loan. Instead of that guy paying me, he will pay you instead. And either of those cases, Rabbi Meir says that's fine, it works. Chachamim say it does not work. So we ask, the IOU, who owes who money? If it's someone else, a third party that owes me money, and I have an IOU document that they have to pay me, and I give that over to the woman, well, that's the same as the second case in the Braita, that someone else owes me money. So that would be repetitive. Can't be that case. Rather, it must be that this woman owes me money, and I have an IOU from her, and now I am giving her the IOU, which is basically the same as doing Kiddushin with a loan, right? By giving her the money of the loan that I already gave her. And the Rav said that was no good, which would mean that Rav is taking the side of Chachamim, but there's another opinion of Rabbi Meir. But why would Rav all of a sudden say like a new law? Oh, I think this, when he's just siding with Chachamim. He's not actually saying anything new. This is just one side of a machloket Tanaim. So we're going to answer by showing, in fact, no, this Braita is talking about another case. So here's the answer. In fact, it's a third party loan. So what's the difference between the first and second cases of the Braita? The first case is when someone else owes me the money and it's written down, I have a written IOU. Whereas the second case where it says, and I say, you have permission to collect it, that's when it was an orally made loan. And we'll see how that is affected. Okay, so in fact, both of them are from a third party. Therefore, this Braita actually has nothing to do with a loan that I gave to the woman. And then I said, you know what? You're Mekudeshet with that loan. This Braita, both parts of it are about a third party loan. Okay, if that's the case, now we're going to just analyze this Braita. What is the machloket, the essence of the machloket in Rabbi Meir, who says it works, and Chamim say it doesn't work? We're going to offer 4 different possibilities for the first case, where it's written, and one explanation of the second case, where it's an orally made loan. In the first case, where it's a written IOU, what's that? The root of their machloket. Rabbi Meir and Chachamim are arguing on the same point that Rabbi Haidan Nasi and Rabbanan are arguing. Even though Rabbi is actually a generation later than Rabbi Meir, we're not speaking so much historically, but rather conceptually, they are arguing on the same points. Tanya, otiyot niktot b'msira divrei Rabbi. וחכמים אומרים בין שכתב ולא מסר, בין שמסר ולא כתב, לא קנה עד שיכתוב וימסור. The question was, how can you transfer an IOU? Yeah, generally, movable items, if I give it to you and you pull it, you pick it up, then it's yours. But in this case, I'm trying to transfer a document. And this document, if I just give it to you and you pick it up, so then you certainly own the piece of paper, but we want to transfer more than the piece of paper. We want to transfer the meaning, the legal significance of the document, which is being said here as the letters, right? It's not, you want to transfer not just the ink of the letters, but the force of the document that says this, you can use this to go and collect money. So how can you transfer an IOU? How can you transfer the obligation that is written within a document? Rabbi says you can do that just by regular transfer, just by handing it over. And so if I'm a guy and I transfer this to a woman, and this is an IOU from a third party, and I say, here, you mekadesh it to me with this, and she takes that piece of paper and takes that document, she now gets the rights to collect the loan, and that's worth money. So that's good. That's why it works. So Rabbi works is the same as Rabbi Meir, that you can transfer just in that way. Whereas Chachamim say, no, it doesn't work. If I want to transfer an IOU to you, I have to also write another document of sale that says, I'm transferring that document. I need a document about the document. Because I could give you the paper and you'll own the piece of paper, but you won't own the content of it. So if I write a document, another document, then I can do that. So Chachamim say, whether I wrote a sale document but I didn't give you the IOU, doesn't work. Or if I give you the IOU but don't write a sale document, that also doesn't work. I have to write a separate sale document and give you the IOU, and only then is it transferred. And we're talking about a case here where I didn't do all that. I just gave a woman an IOU without writing a sale document, and therefore, according to the B, it's the obligation transfers. You can collect the loan. So therefore, that's the same as Rabbi Meir said mikudeshet. And Chachamim here are the same as Chachamim in that previous beraita, I didn't write a transfer document, and therefore there is no Kiddushin. That's the opinion of Chachamim here. Matches up with Chachamim there. More itle de Rabbi or more letle de Rabbi. So Rabbi Meir follows Rabbi, or has the same opinion as Rabbi, and the sages in the first beraita disagree with Rabbi. Oh, that is one possibility. Or we're going through all this exercise of it, 1, 2, 3, 4 different explanations, because now we get a tour of all kinds of different things that can go right or wrong in transferring an IOU. So this is a very educational exercise. Or maybe, in fact, everybody disagrees with Rabbi. It's a minority opinion anyway. And in fact, in order to transfer something, you do need to give the paper and you have to write another transfer document. And the argument is regarding what Rav Papa says. The Rav Papa is much later Amora. So we're not saying historically that Rabbi Meir Hachamim knew about Rav Papa, but we're saying conceptually this would be a difference between whether it will be effectuated or not. Because he says, Haiman de zaben shtara lechabre tzarich lemichtav lekene lach hu v'chol shibudeh mor itle de Rav Papa or mor letle de Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, if I want to transfer an IOU, I have to write another document, and that other transfer document, I have to write in it, I am giving to you this promissory note and all of the liens that are associated with it, right? You get the liens on any land that the borrower that I have on the borrower's land. Now you can go and collect that from that land. If he, let's say, sold it to someone else, I have to write that in the document. So let's say I didn't write that in the document. According to Rabbanan, they agree with Rav Papa. You have to write a document, and you didn't write a document. Therefore, there is no transfer of transfer of the IOU, and therefore there is no Kiddushin. Whereas Rabbi Meir disagrees with Rav Papa and thinks you don't have to write that in a document, and therefore I just wrote you a regular transfer document without that special formula, and it worked. But it still works because he disagreed with Rav Papa, and the IOU is transferred, and therefore there is Kiddushin. That's option 2. Option 3. In fact, maybe everybody agrees that you have to write a transfer note and you have to write that formula in it. And let's say we did. We wrote the transfer. The groom, the guy here, wrote it properly, and so the IOU would be transferred to the woman. So it looks like that should be good kiddushin. However, another snag. שמואל כמפלגה, דאמר שמואל, המוכר שטר חוב לחברו, וחזר ומחלו מחול, ואפילו יורש מוחל. דמור אית לדשמואל, ומור לת לדשמואל. They're arguing about what Shmuel said. Shmuel says, if some third party owes me money, I have an IOU. If I transfer it to you, let's say you're a woman, I transfer it to you, and then afterwards, if now it's yours, right? So it's a good transfer. We do it all properly, and you can go collect that money. I go to that third party after I transfer the IOU to you, and I say, you know what? I'm going to forget the loan. I'm going to forgive the loan that you owed me. If, according to Shemuel, someone who does that and then forgives the loan, it is forgiven. And when you, the woman, go and try to collect it, he'll say, "Oh yeah, that he already canceled the loan, forgave the loan, and then you can't collect it." And even if I should die and my inheritors come, they can go ahead and forgive the loan to that extent. So, how is that relevant? The sages who say there's no Kiddushin here, they agree with Shemuel, and therefore there's no Kiddushin, because even though transferring an IOU was done in all the right ways with Papa's formula, because I can always forgive the loan, cancel it, so then you are never secure in receiving something. So when I do Kiddushin and give you something that is not secure, that I can cancel at any time, that's not a real giving, and you're going to be like, I don't want to be mikudeshet with something that you can go and just cancel at any time, so it's not a good Kiddushin. Whereas Rabbi Meir says, no, I disagree with Shemuel. Once I give an IOU to you and I transfer it properly, I have no more right to forgive the loan, and therefore you are getting something secure, and that's why, according to Rabbi Meir, the Kiddushin works. Finally, the fourth possibility for the first clause in the Mishnah of a written loan. Maybe in fact everyone agrees of the law of Shmuel that I can cancel that loan at any time, even after I transfer the IOU to you. Rather, we are arguing on the psychology of a woman, the receiver as a bride. And they're arguing as follows. It says that a woman will rely on the IOU because she'll say to herself, my fiance, future husband, is not going to leave me without any benefit and forgive that loan to the third party. After all, right? Let's say it was owed to me and I give it to a woman. I get no benefit in forgiving the loan because I'm forgiving a loan that is going to go to someone else. So. And now I'm hurting the person that I'm about to marry. So a woman says a fiance would not go ahead and do that. So she considers it secure. And therefore she says, yes, she agrees to Kiddushin. That's Rabbi Meir. Whereas Rabbanan think that women are more wary of guys, and maybe I gave her this Kiddushin, but it was just like in the moment I decided to do that, but then I would go and cancel the loan and thereby cancel the Kiddushin that she got. And a woman therefore knows that men can be fickle like that and not trustworthy, and she will not rely on this IOU to accept her obligation to Kiddushin, and therefore the Kiddushin is invalid. Okay, very interesting. All different, 4 different possibilities of understanding the first clause in the Mishnah, in that Baraita. The second clause in the Baraita that said a third party loan, that was talking about an oral loan, not an IOU. So it would be at the root of the Machloket between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim, that it either works or doesn't work in that case. Rav said that you can transfer something like this type of oral thing, loan, in the presence of 3 parties. Which 3 parties? That third party guy, he owes me money. I don't have an IOU. He owes me money. Now I bring you along and let's assume that you're a woman and I'm going to do Kiddushin as well. So I bring all three together and I tell that third party, listen, you owe me $100. Instead of paying me, pay this woman over here and you will be mikudeshet to me by doing that. So in general, this third party situation, Rav says it works, and you actually the rights to that money are transferred to you. Now, what would be wrong with it? Mor Sabad, the rabbis who say there's no kiddushin, they think they say when Rav said you can do this presence of three type of transfer, that was only regarding an item that I deposited with that third party and they have to return the item. Let's say I deposited a nice book. I said, here, right, you can borrow this book, you, hold on to it for me, you have to return it to me. And now I say, oh, this woman, you would like this book, so I bring all three together. I say, instead of giving me the book, give the book to this woman here, and I will be mikudeshet through that. In that case, it works, because she will rely on the fact that she's going to get the book because the book is intact, right? When I lend the book, he has to return that very same book, right? He can't just return a different book altogether. He has to do this exact same one. So it's somewhere in his house, in his office, in his car. I don't know. He has it somewhere. And so she relies on the fact that she will get it. Unlike money, if I give him $100, he's not returning the same $100 bill. He's returning some. So he doesn't actually have, I don't know what money he's getting. I don't know if he even has any money right now. So in that case, I tell him, listen, don't pay me back, pay her back. She's going to not rely on that she's going to get it. And therefore, she does not accept the Kiddushin when I say, oh, that guy will give it to you. In general, the three-party meeting there, according to this view, does not work for loans because it's less reliable, and therefore the Kiddushin doesn't work. Whereas Rabbi Meir, Mor Sabad, Lo Shena Milveh, Lo Shena Pikadon. Rabbi Meir thinks that Rav would agree that this three-party meeting type of transfer is effective both for a pikadon, for a book, or for a loan. And the loan also, I say, instead of giving me $100, give that to her, and she will be content and confident that she will get the money, and this does effectuate an actual transfer. You have the right to go and collect it, and therefore there is a kiddushin, and that is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. We now have another similar challenge against Rav. Nema ketanae, hidkadeshi li bishtar. Rabbi Meir omer ena mikudeshet, Rabbi Elazar omer mikudeshet. Hachamim omrim shaminet haniyar, im yesh po shaveh peruta mikudeshet, v'im lav ena mikudeshet. It would seem that Rav's position that you cannot do kiddushin with a loan seems to line up with only one of the following Tanaim, and that's it's possible, but it's strange that Rav would be issuing a ruling that happens to be on only agreeing with only one side of a Tanaitic dispute. And this is a case where a guy gives a document, will clarify what kind of document it is to a woman, and say, be mikudesh to me with this. Rabbi Meir says it's no good. Rabbi Elazar says it is good, Kiddushin is fine. And Chachamim say, we can't look at the content of the document, but rather we look at the paper itself. Sometimes it's fancy paper that might be worth a shaveh peruta if it is mikudeshet, just for the value of the paper, and if not mikudeshet. Whereas the first two are not looking at the value of the paper, but rather the content of the paper. Now, what kind of document is this? If it's an IOU that let's say I'm the guy who's giving it to the woman, is an IOU that a third party owes me money and I'm giving it to her, well then Rabbi Meir over here says that would contradict what Rabbi Meir said in the previous baraita in the exact same case, where Rabbi Meir says that was fine. So it can't be that it's an IOU from a third party. Rather, it must be that it's an IOU that this woman owes me money, and I'm giving her the IOU, and so I am doing Kiddushin with a loan. And that's the very machloket. Rabbi Meir says that you cannot do it with a loan. That would agree with Rav. And Rabbi Elazar says you can do Kiddushin with a loan. Hachamim aren't sure. So therefore they say, well, we'll go by the value of the paper. So here we go. This is a machloket around what Rav said. So that's the problem. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak hacha b'Iskinan kegon shekidusha b'shtar she'en alav idim. Rav Nachman says, no, you understood this beraita all wrong. It's not talking about a loan document, but rather a kiddushin document, right? You can do kiddushin with kesef, shtar, and bi'ah. This we're talking about shtar. But the problem with the shtar is that it doesn't have witnesses signed on it, and that is subject to a machloket. Rabbi Meir says it's no good because he requires that a shtar kiddushin has to be signed. Those signatures, that's what effectuates the divorce. Now we're talking about divorce. We're going to analogize to shtar kiddushin as well, and assume it's the same. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Elazar thinks that for a divorce document, you don't need it to be signed. It's the ones that hand it over. You need witnesses to see it handed over, and that's so therefore it would be a valid divorce document even without witnesses. And we're assuming they would say the same thing for kiddushin, that you just have to write on the paper and it doesn't have to be signed. You just have to give it in front of two witnesses, and therefore in this case it's valid. Rabbanan מספקה lahu ikir b'meir ikir b'Elazar hilkach shemin taniyad im yesh bo shemei piruta mikudeshet v'im lav ena mikudeshet. Whereas the rabbis are not sure if the halacha should follow b'meir and b'Elazar, and therefore they said, well, you know what? Let's just appraise the piece of paper, and if the paper itself is b'shemei piruta, then we can rely on that. Otherwise, we're not sure if it will be good, so we'll assume it's not good. Or another way to interpret this very beraita that has nothing to do, such that it will have nothing to do with doing kiddushin with a loan, so it wouldn't affect Rav. We're talking about, he made, again, it's still a shtar kiddushin, but he wrote it without intention for this woman. He wrote it just, for, it happens to be the same name, but he wrote it for someone else. And this was itself a subject of a question that Resh Lakish asked. Ashtad Erusin, if you didn't write it for the sake of this particular woman, is it valid? Here's the two sides. On the one hand, we should compare entering a marriage with exiting a marriage, and just like exiting a marriage with a get has to be written for this particular woman's sake, so too shtar kiddushin has to, and otherwise it's no good. Or should we compare a shtar kiddushin to money? Just like you could do kiddushin with money, and you don't have to have a coin that's minted for the sake of this woman, you just take any regular coin. So too, for a shtar kiddushin is the same, and you could just write a standard formula and give it to her, and doesn't have to be written for this particular woman. And so this is a question that he asked. But Resh Lakish answered his dilemma himself and said from the pasuk, since it connects in the same pasuk, exiting marriage and entering marriage, more it led the Resh Lakish, more let the Resh Lakish. So that Resh Lakish himself concluded that yes, a shtar kiddushin has to be written lishma, and Rabbi Meir agreed with Resh Lakish, and therefore we're talking about a case where the guy gave a woman a shtar kiddushin that was not written for her sake, and therefore Rabbi Meir says it's no good, whereas Rabbi Elazar says it is good, and the rabbis were uncertain, so they follow the value of the paper. Or yet another explanation of this beraita. Everybody agrees with the law of Resh Lakish has to be written lishma, but here we're arguing on a different machloket, that even if you write it lishma but without her knowledge, is that a valid shtar kiddushin? We looked at Rabbi Rava, Ravina, Rav Papa, Rav Sherevya Kami Palge. This is a machloket involving four amoraim. The itmar ketavot lishma v'shlomidata Rava Ravina amar mekudeshet. If you write it having her in mind, but you didn't ask her first before you wrote it, that, is it okay that I'm going to write a shtar Kiddushin for you? So according to Rava and Ravina, the Kiddushin is fine. And so that would be the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. These two sages say it's not good, and that would be the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Okay, good. So we saw 3 different ways of interpreting that baraita, and now we get to the next and last similar challenge against Rav. Ne'ema kehanatan hanitanaeh. Is Rav taking one side in the following machloket, the Tanya. Aseh li shirim nezamim b'tabaot ekadesh ani lecha, kevan she'asa'an mekudeshet Rabbi Meir. Hachamim omrim ena mekudeshet ad she'agia mamon liyada. A woman goes to a man who happens to be a jeweler, and she gives him some gold and says, "Can you make out of this gold, make bracelets or earrings or rings for me, and I will be mikudeshet to you with the labor that you put in." Is that valid? Is that enough that something he is giving to her, the making of the jewelry, even though he's not adding any more gold? Is that the value of that labor? Can you do Kiddushin with that? So the answer is, once he makes it, according to the Rabbi Meir, yes, the Kiddushin is valid. Chachamim say, no, it's not valid until the money gets to her hand. Now, what money are we talking about? Hai mamon hechi dameh. First, we have to just clarify the case. If it's talking about that very gold, the gold that she gave to him, so that would mean that according to Tanakama, that's Rabbi Meir, that with that money by itself, she is mikudeshet, because that's what it said. Chachamim say until it gets to her hand. That would mean according to Rabbi Meir, even before it gets to her hand. Once she gives it to him, and he just, makes the earrings, just with that money, she's mikudeshet, but with what, right? Because he didn't give her anything yet. He didn't even give her that jewelry. Never mind adding other things to it. So it's impossible that Rabbi Meir would say that she is mikudeshet before anything comes to her hand. Ela la b'mamon acher. Rather, it must be other money. What other money? It's not that he's taking out more money, but rather that, although we'll see there's one possibility that maybe he adds a jewel here, but it's not that he's giving her more money, but rather with the value of that very labor. Now that labor, we're going to prove, is like a loan, right? While he's working on it. And therefore we can conclude that the machlok between Bimei and Chachamim is about whether you can do Kiddushin with a loan. And Rabbi Meir says yes, Chachamim say no. Here's the explanation. V'sabreh. Zekula alma yeshna l'schut b'techila v'atsof v'hava milveh. Ma'ilab ha'mikam mipalgeh. The mosava mekadosh milveh mekudeshet, mosava mekadosh milveh ena mekudeshet. It must be that everybody's agreeing here that when you that wages sechirut, right? When do they take effect? Right? When are wages owed? So we're assuming now that everybody would agree they accrue gradually while the work is being done from beginning to end. So this jeweler, he takes this jewelry. Let's say it takes him 1 hour to make a ring, and he's charged, and the normal price would be $60. That would be $1 per minute. So after 15 minutes, he would be owed $15, right? So it's gradually accruing. She isn't paying. She isn't up there paying at every moment, but rather it's accruing as a loan that she will then have to pay him when she comes to pick up the item. So assuming that that's the case, this is a case of a loan. She's saying, here, take this gold and be mikudeshet to me with the work that you put into it, and those wages is something that I will owe you as you are working on it. And so then once you're finished, this is a loan, and by you saying, you know what, don't pay the loan, I'm giving you this labor. Yeah, but that's the same as doing Kiddushin with a loan. And this is the very thing that Rav said is no good. So it seems here that that's their argument. And the Rabbi Meir, who says this is good, would say you can do Kiddushin with a loan. And Rabbanan would say that you cannot do Kiddushin with a loan. And then Rav is taking sides, and the minority side at that, in a machloket. No, majority side here. He's saying ena mikudeshet. Still, even though he's taking a majority side, we wonder why he should be quoting the baraita and say halacha is like chachamim. He shouldn't say it like it's a new law, like that's out of the blue. Okay, so we answer la dekula ama mekadesh b'maveh na mikudesh. No, in fact, both opinions agree here that you cannot do kiddushin with a loan, as Rav says. Rather, they're arguing about how wages accrue. That's the very essence of their argument. Mor sabar ena l'schidut ela lebasof. So that Rabbi Meir thinks that the wages are only come at the end. There's no loan. She doesn't owe him anything while he's working on it. When does the obligation to pay kick in? Only when she shows back up at the store and he shows it to her and she's picking it up and she's going to take it. At that point, now that you're taking it, you have to pay for the service. There wasn't a loan before that. It's a payment due at delivery. Therefore, it's not a loan. It's at that point of delivery when he gives the jewelry to her. The gold itself is only returning, that it belongs to her, so he's only returning it. But the labor is due on the spot, and he's saying here, take this and the labor I am giving you, and therefore it's a good kiddushin. It's not a loan. Whereas, according to the sages, it is a loan because he is owed that all throughout, right? It keeps accruing, and he says, okay, I'll put it on your tab every minute. And so it's accruing as a loan. So then he comes and he's basically saying, okay, I'll forgive the loan. Here, you can be mikudeshet with this loan. And that's why, according to Rabbanan, it's no good. It's really how you conceptualize the point at which the obligation for the wages kicks in. Or another way of interpreting this baraita, in fact, everybody's agreeing that the accrues gradually, and therefore it is a loan, and you cannot do kiddushin with a loan. But they're arguing on something else about whether an artisan who improves something, does he gain ownership of that item? So in this case, one Tana, that's Rabbi Meir, he thinks the way it works as follows. She gave him gold, let's say $100 worth of gold. Now he is going to form it into a nice earring, and now it'll be worth $150. That extra $50 of value, that is, the craftsman has ownership over that extra $50. And so then, when she comes to pick it up, and she will pay him $50, she's basically buying his share in the earring. That's how, according to the Rabbi Meir, that's how he thinks that the payment accrues, right? It's not actually for the labor. She's not paying him for the labor, but rather he takes something that was worth $100, he turns it into something worth $150. So she owns $100 of it, he owns $50 of it. If she wants to get it back, she just has to pay out his share. And therefore, when he says, you know what, take it, as money of kiddushin, he is giving her something on the spot. Whereas the sages say, no, a craftsman doesn't ever get any ownership in the thing that he's working on. He's paid wages, like a day laborer. How much time did you put into it? That's how much you get paid, and it accrues gradually, and therefore it's a loan, and that's why they say it's no good. Very interesting way of just conceptualizing, right? How does it work? When someone does work for you, there's different types of work, and if he's working on an item and improving it, right? And what if I don't show up and pay, right? Then he could sell it. Okay, so that's an interesting conceptualization. Or yet another. Everyone agrees that no, he doesn't have ownership in the item. It's just paying for the time and wages for his work. And it accrues gradually, so therefore it's a loan. And you can't do kiddushin with a loan. Everybody agrees to all those things. And we're talking about a case where the jeweler added one jewel, right? She gave him just a clump of gold, and he made a ring and added a nice jewel on top. and he's giving it to her. So he did add something. So why should it not be good? Well, according to the Meir, it is good because when you give, when a man gives to a woman the loan, right, a release of a loan, and even one peruta, his mind is on the peruta. The kiddushin is going to be with the peruta. The milveh, the loan is a side point, and therefore it's a valid kiddushin. Whereas the rabbis say he has in mind the loan primarily, because that's like the main thing. Oh, I'm going to give you this loan, right? And you don't have to pay it back. But the kiddushin doesn't work with a loan, and he does not having in mind the little jewel that he added to it. So since the kiddushin is dependent in their minds on the loan and not the peruta, then it's no good. Unless they would say explicitly, listen, here's back your thing, and you can keep the value of the labor. That's just a gift. The kiddushin is with the jewel. If he knows and says that, fine. But we assume that they don't think that, and that's why it's no good. And now we're going to prove that this subject, whether a person has in mind only the peruta or the loan and the peruta, we're going to see from the following source that this is in fact a subject to a machloket in a different tosefta. ובפלוגתא דתניא, בשכר שעשיתי עמך אינה מקודשת, בשכר שאעשה עמך מקודשת. רבי נתן אומר בשכר שאעשה עמך אינה מקודשת, וכל שכן בשכר שעשיתי עמך. In this baraita, the woman goes to this guy, the craftsman, goes to the woman. In the first case, is after he does the work and already returns it to her, and then he says, "Listen, could you be mikudeshet to me with the work that I did? They already did. That's no good." Even though we're going to show that this Tanakama thinks that the sechirut does not accrue over time, but rather is only owed at the end. But here he already gave her back the ring. And then he says, "Oh, the labor that I did, yeah, but it's already too late because he already gave it back, and so either she already paid for it or it already was owed, and therefore, and at that point it would become a loan. So it's no good. Whereas if beforehand he says, the work that I will do for you, I want you to be mikudeshet with that. Well, that's okay because he thinks that the work does not accrue gradually, but rather is only at the end when she comes to pick it up. And at that point, he will say, he already said, be mikudeshet to me with the work that I'm going to do. And so at that point, when he gives her the ring, he's giving her the ring and also the labor that he put into it, which has value, and that's why it's good kiddushin. So Tanakama thinks that the labor is only owed at the end of the job when he transferred the item back to her, and therefore it's mikudeshet in the future. Rabbi Natan says no, either way is no good, even in the future, because he thinks that the wages accrue gradually, and so even if beforehand he says, listen, with the labor that I'm going to do, you be mikudeshet to me, still doesn't help because as he's working, it's accruing as a loan. And then at the end, he says, okay, here it is, and you don't have to pay the loan. That's no good. That's the loan. And all the more so if he says it after he already gave it back to her, then certainly it's no good. So that's the subject of the machlok between the first two. That's not what's interesting to us in this, but rather the next opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi omer be'emet amru ben b'schar she'asita ben b'schar she'aseh machana mikudeshet. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi agrees in that sense with Rabbi Natan that is no good both in the future and the past. Ve'im osif la nofech mishelo mikudeshet. But Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi adds, if the jeweler adds a little jewel on it and then gives her the ring with the extra jewel, then that's a good kiddushin. Now, and presumably Rabbi Natan would disagree with that. Why? Ben Tanakama and Rabbi Natan ika ben sechirut. The difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Natan is whether the wages accrue, that's Rabbi Natan, or at the end, that's Tanakama that we talked about. But the next one, Ben Rabbi Natan ben Rabbi Yehuda, what's the difference between them? Hanasi ika benau milveh upruta. Mor sabah milveh upruta da'ate a milveh, or mor sabah da'ate a peruta. One Tana, that's Rabbi Natan, thinks that when you forgive a loan, but also add a peruta, a person's mind is on the loan, and you can't do kiddushin with a loan, and that's why he says it's no good, even if the jeweler adds a jewel, whereas Rabbi Yehuda Nasi thinks that his mind is on the peruta, I'm forgiving the loan, but that's the side point. That's just a gift. Really, the main point is the jewel. And so we see that there is, in fact, a machloket about this topic. And so we can apply that same machloket back here, that Rabbi Meir is the one that says, yes, so in a case where he added a jewel, and the person has in mind the peruta, and therefore the Rabbi Meir says in this case is good, and Rabbanan say it is an invalid kiddushin. We continue with the next Mishnah. Hitkadashili because ze shel yayin v'nimsa shel devash. A man tells a woman, "Be mikudeshet to me with this cup of wine," but it turns out there's not wine in the cup, but rather honey, or the other way around. Shel devash imsa shel yayin. Here, be mikudeshet to me with this cup of honey, but it turns out there's no honey in it; it's wine. Or another case, bedina shel zeh shel kesef, nimsa shel zahav v'nimsa shel kesef. A man says, "Be mikudeshet to me with this silver coin," turns out but it's actually gold. Or the other way around, he says be mikudeshet with this gold coin, but it turns out that's actually silver. Or amanat ashir v'msa ani v'nimsa ashir and amikudeshet. Or if he says be mikudeshet to me for I am rich, but actually he's poor. Or if he says on condition that I'm rich and turns out he's poor. Or he says be mikudeshet to me on condition that I am poor, but it turns out he's rich. In all these cases, the kiddushin is no good, right? This was, in these cases, it's an explicit condition, and so the condition is not fulfilled. Or the other things, he's describing the thing in the wrong way. It's not actually the item that he said it was. According to Tanakama, it doesn't matter if the item is better or worse. Gold is better than silver, so you might think, well, if I said silver, it turns out to be gold, that's better. No, according to Tanakama, it's no good because it's not the same as what he said. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon Omer, imital shebach mekudesh. Rabbi Shimon, however, disagrees and says if he misled her, but it's to or for her advantage, then it's good. I said I'm giving you silver. Turns out to be gold, even better. So certainly the kiddushin should be valid. The Gemara is going to clarify. Tenora banan hitkachile because ze. When he says over here, right, be mekudesh to me with this cup of wine. What does he have in mind? What about the cup? It's like a lot of times you, if you give someone a present of a cake and on a dish. So is the gift the cake? Or also the dish? You have to return the dish. Is the dish part of the gift? Maybe the main thing is the dish because it's more expensive, and the cake just happens to be on it. Okay, so the same thing here. Tane Hada, there's 3 baraitot, and each of them have all the possibilities. One says bo ubemashe betocho. When he says be mekudesh to me with this cup, what he means is take the cup and the contents. Both of them are yours. Another opinion says, no, we're talking about the cup itself. He's not thinking about what's inside it. Whereas the third baraita says, when he says, marry me with this cup of wine, he means the wine and not the cup at all. But actually, there's no machloket between the 3. They're talking about 3 different cases depending on what's in it. Ha b'maya, ha b'chamra, ha b'sihara. One of the cases is referring to a cup of water, the other a cup of wine, and the other a cup of oil. Now, how do these match up? There's a lot of opinions about it. We'll just cite that of Rashi and Rabbeinu Hananel, that if it's filled with water, then the person has in mind the cup alone, because water doesn't have any value. So if it happens to be a cup of water, and he says, be mekudesh to me with this cup, we ignore the water, and we assume it's the value of the cup. If it's full of wine, then wine is very valuable, and people tend to drink wine right away, otherwise it'll spoil. So in that case, we assume he has in mind the wine only, and not the cup. Right? The cup she will return, or whatever. It's a paper cup, doesn't matter. Whereas if it's oil, then we assume it's the cup and the content. Because if I give someone oil, they're not drinking all the oil. There's oil that they're going to put aside. They'll use a little now, a little bit later. And so in that case, you assume that the cup is also being given as part of the Kiddushin. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.